Oh, um, wait, who is the judicial review? Uh, wait, wait. Wait. Oh, oh, sorry, that was a loud noise. You're here, Vergilius Rex.
Hey, what's up?
Hello, Vergilius Rex.
How you doing, eh?
So we're live. We're live now.
We're live.
Oh,
Sorry.
hello
Okay.
everyone.
Okay. Have you talked to Endeavour before, Vergilius Rex?
Endeavour, no.
How you doing?
Fine.
I'm pretty good.
Asian Man, also known as Nazbul, should be coming too, and there should be more reviews. Okay, so, oh, and here is Francisco Devo too, which I didn't even know who he is exactly. So that's beside the point. Now, what is the first topic that we will talk about?
So is it about you had mentioned entertainment? So kind of.
Yes, it's a fairly difficult topic to talk about only because I have trouble trying to describe the topic, and I'm not even sure Vergilius Rex is familiar with that topic, or
No.
yourself.
I don't know which context you were supposed to tackle this question. I
The
need some previous context of information.
Well, I'm talking about politics in entertainment in general, but with an odd twist. And it's how people analyze entertainment in general, because both sides are not, the left and the right are not exactly right or wrong when it comes to thinking there are politics in there. Because conservatives thinking that there are leftist bias in entertainment aren't exactly any better than um, than leftists saying there's sexism or racism in entertainment, and that even includes some of the alt-righters.
Well, I will say that a lot of Hollywood does have a left-leaning slant. Now that's nothing
Yes.
new. That's nothing new, but it definitely does push culture in a certain direction.
Um, okay, but did you watch the video in which a centrist was responding to Ben Shapiro?
Oh, I missed that one.
I linked a video to you through a direct message.
Oh, okay. Yes. What I'll say is that Hollywood, they do kind of have a clique that it is pretty it is pretty clear that they do want people to conform the messages that they send out to conform to the various beliefs that are held by the clique. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yes. Okay. Well, have you? Now, this is going to be a little difficult to describe this, but have you watched any videos by Fox from the West?
I've seen a few.
Well, he is fairly critical towards Paul Joseph Watson, how he understands culture, especially popular culture. And Fox has a point, though to be fair, Fox refers to Watson as a retrograde right winger, similar to how, as you would describe, boomer conservatives interpret that.
Well, I will say that I do agree with some of Paul Joseph Watson's criticisms of popular culture, but I will also say that he doesn't really have a very deep understanding of what's wrong with it. I'd say that he often just goes on about about these certain things, but he doesn't really go into depth on well, why is this thing wrong? And for example, what I will say is that I really feel that art is declining because of well, materialism, really. That people can't see the value beyond that in art, and I'd say that's really kind of the reason that modern art's so bad.
Your thoughts, Vergilius Rex?
Well, on that side of the question, well, I think there certainly is a problem on our modern constitutions because they are liberal constitutions and they don't establish any form of control. Everything is said to be as you want it to be, as long as it is within the frame of liberalism itself and democracy, of course. So one of the problems with that is that no standard of ethics, any standard at all is set. For example, in the case of the United States, all of that is delegated to the states. But then to the states can be anything at all, all within the framework of democracy. And that is one of the reasons of the decadence. There is simply no control. There's no stop. Where do you put the limit? You can say that there is a limit, that the people put the limit themselves, but the people change. The people are influenced. So a limit there is an illusion because democracy itself has no limit. That's one of the reasons of why Hollywood is, well, sprawling with Jews and communists that create this kind of films in which they can put any message they want and influence the general public. And those sorts of people are the ones that have specifically put those kinds of what we would call decadent content on set media and entertainment. And that goes beyond pure cinema. It goes also for TV and for the media.
Okay. I'll disagree a bit with that because I do think that really kind of just the reason for the decline is in popular culture is just consumerism, really. And I don't believe in like a conspiracy theory that there's someone like out there deliberately trying to force force communism or whatever. But I will say that the message is a left-leaning message, which really does go. It does favor the breakdown of and the breakdown of traditional Western society. I'll say that.
Well, I didn't say there was something like hidden and fishy, something of conspiracies, but ask yourself, whence come consumerism? From what's the origin of consumerism? What's the cause of consumerism?
I'd say materialism.
What's the cause of materialism?
I guess lack of belief in God, lack of appreciation for your nation, your the civilization you grew up in, and yeah, I just say it's a narrow worldview. I'd say that's what causes materialism.
So, again, that's the thing. You say that there's a lack of certain values or certain ethical considerations. Well, how do we give or maintain said ethical predispositions in such a liberal country? You cannot. There's no control about that.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's very difficult.
So the source of that is simply that there is no control. There's no examine the American Constitution for a little second. Yeah, you will see no establishment of any ethical concern except the basic legal framework of government function, government mechanism. Yes, but
yeah,
compare it with, for example, an ancient constitution, a Spartan constitution, Athenian constitution. Those are full of ethical predispositions. Full of them. Yes?
Oh, yeah. I would agree that that is better.
Well, that is the difference. You can say that the state leaves the place to, for example, a religion to take care of that. But again, where is the authority to regulate said predispositions? Or let's say customs. Yes, customs of the nation to be ethical.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot simply do that. because the control or the let's call that the organization must be taken as the whole nation. You cannot simply delegate the control to a subservient branch like religion, especially if that branch is again managed by basically popularity, whatever pleases.
Yeah, I agree that that is a very that it's a problem that society doesn't have a moral framework that it functions on. And yes, I do agree that just that anything goes, and in modern democracy is a big problem. I'd agree with that.
Okay, so Endeavor, did you watch any of the videos I directly linked to you as resources?
Yeah, I watched the one by Dr. Lehman, and I watched the one about the entertainment front.
By the Motley Discourse?
Yes, I did.
Because those are contrasting views and analyses.
Yep.
And how do you feel about them?
Well, I think Dr. Lehman makes a few good points about. I do think that Paul Joseph Watson comes across as very uneducated in a lot of things he talks about, and I think that he doesn't. I mean, I agree with the things he says he doesn't like in culture. I agree. I don't like either, but his view of it seems to be a very shallow one. And I would say that why the right kind of is losing the entertainment front. I mean that's pretty much just apparent because yeah, all the TV shows, all the movies, they always sometimes explicitly, sometimes just slightly, but they often tend to have a left-leaning message, and politics is just downstream from culture. So if all these popular films are pushing something, that's the direction the culture is going to go.
Well, true, there is a big indicator, but there are also a few contradictions with that, however. Although, to be fair, there are also arguments that are actually flawed within those contradictions. Um, there was a video I watched by a very big nutcase named Lindsay Ellis, in which she reviewed the movie Blazing Saddles. Have you watched the movie?
I've seen the movie. Yeah, it's a good
And
movie. Okay, continue.
and at first I was going to politely disagree, but on some parts of the video, but and I initially thought that was rather objective, even though I had a few disagreements. But when I was informed on how she analyzed media in general through a very social justice lens, and I later found out that there was a few misinterpretations on how on a few quotes she cited from Mel Brooks. I came to realize that she misrepresented the movie, especially when in her later videos she was talking about people of color within the movie um, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Now, let's stick with the Blazing Saddles example. Later in the video, she cited that the reason that um, let's see, media or Hollywood isn't going left wing, and there are still racist jokes in there because of shows like South Park, Family Guy, and American Dad, or The Simpsons. However, the argument is flawed, especially on Family Guy, because first of all, those were grandfathered in. Uh, Two, both sides now hate Family Guy. The leftists hate the show for obviously for obvious reasons, such as the dirty humor. But conservatives and centrists also now hate the show because of how poorly written the recent episodes are, especially and how unfunny the jokes are. even if it is trying to be politically incorrect. And Seth MacFarlane, the creator of the show, has tried for years to end the show, but his network wouldn't let him.
Yeah. So what I'll say to that is, I mean, Lindsay Ellis is an SJW. That's not a surprise. But what you'll see is that what they really want, they demand ideological conformity. So the fact that that entertainment it does lean left, but they want it to be 100%. So they have to lash out at stuff that does not conform. And you also have to understand that they need to fuel progressivism. They really do need to find these. They really do need to find everything to be racist. So they need to constantly pick out these parts, and then they need to make a fuss about them. And then what'll happen is there'll be an article about it on Huffington Post. Then the creators will come out and say that they're going to change it. The fans are not going to like it, and then the series generally dies.
Yes, and besides, I've already heard a few alt-writers disliking Blazing Saddles because of Jewish propaganda.
Well, it's a funny movie. I mean, I don't know about that, but
Because the whites were portrayed as racist even though they overlooked the fact that no one was spared.
yeah, I'd say Blazing Saddles that does kind of make fun of everyone. So, but yeah, I mean the trend that we're seeing is it's a constant shift in that direction. So, for example, a movie that would have been like, for example, a TV show like Friends, that would have been considered a progressive show in the 90s. But now progressives are looking at Friends and saying, "Oh, look how racist it is. Look how many white people there are. Look at how sexist it is." So the way that it works is that they constantly shift further and further left. So they look back on even progressive entertainment from a couple years ago, and that's now considered racist.
Yes, I understand that. And there was one part of one video by Black Pigeon Speaks in which he used a clip from How I Married Your Mother, I think. And the show was innovating. That was a rather progressive show, and that got away with a lot of fat jokes.
Yes, and now it's being called now the SJWs are saying it was fat shaming.
Yes. Now here's another argument with that. Well, it's about sitcoms from the early 1990s compared to sitcoms from the 1980s. Shows such as Friends, Seinfeld, and How I Married Your Mother, and possibly Everybody Loves Raymond. Those were rather progressive at the time because they were in response to the more conservative sitcoms from the 80s, such as Full House and The Cosby Shows, in which most of the jokes at the time were rather family friendly and mundane, which relies on getting a mundane situation over the top but still remain family friendly, which is not the same on what Seinfeld does with mundane situations, despite slightly foul language and sexual innuendo in there. I mean, that was rather a controversial move at the time. Nowadays, those are rather conservative.
Yes, that is true. I'd agree with that.
Yes, and those shows are rather tame, as in the ones from the 90s compared to South Park.
Well, South Park has always been I mean, you have to understand that these are different. They're different audiences. Like South Park was always designed. South Park originated in the '90s. It was always designed to be a raunchy show. Everybody Loves Raymond. That was like for 6:00 p.m. So it's different target on that one, I'd say.
Yes. Your thoughts, Vergilius Rex?
Well, I do not watch too much American media, to be
Right.
honest.
Is there a similar
But
situation in your
but
country?
on the question of how they get progressively more and more, let's say, debauched, or how their definition of what is acceptable changes by decade. Well, I think it's perfectly normal. As I was talking about there being no limit, the essential nature of progressivism is, well, that they keep moving towards more and more the extreme of whatever they define as just, whatever that may be. But again, as I said, there is no limit, so we can expect everything from them, and that's why it is so easily to mock them that uh, they wouldn't defend the North Koreans, and they're defending the North Koreans, things like that.
Okay. Is there a similar situation within your country, Vergilius Rex?
Mm, well, Mexico consumes a lot of American media, like more than half of is American media. So there's something like that. But the media here for the masses, there's actually like a monopoly on TV here. So you often see like TV for the poor people, which is the majority, is some kind of uh, cheap morality selling of cheap dramas and some sort of proverbialism that does not really question things. Just uh, um, it's mainly put in order to make people content. Really, to do not question things, to be more peaceful, moral, yes, but not really energetic.
Yeah. So you're in Mexico, is it?
Yes.
Okay.
What about the comedy there?
Well, it's like the American one. Really, how would I say it? It's trying to push limits there. It criticizes the government, but does not really go beyond that. Um, it's certainly not a comedy that would change people's minds. Like I don't know, Molière during your reign, but uh, it's standard. You can really just compare it with the American one because it has the same framework, the same inspiration.
Yeah. I'd say that comedy, as in maybe like the late night shows, a lot of them are getting really dry for me. And I think one of the reasons is because I don't see anything very controversial on them anymore. So
Other,
oh, go ahead.
other than criticizing Trump, and then the leftists say stunning and brave for making fun of Trump, even though the humor is actually dry, and that conservatives wouldn't mind that had those comedians, have been poking the left also.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. The reason that the Trump jokes are dry is because it's just all been said before. I mean, sure, there can be some funny things said about Trump. That's for sure. But it's just that it's unoriginal. That's why. I mean, fine. If you can tell a good joke about Trump, I'll probably laugh at it. But the thing is, they're just repeating the same things over and over, and they all have the same shtick. They all have the same take on everything, and it's boring, frankly.
Okay. By the way, do any one of you notice a stutter whenever I talk, or any P or S sounds being over the top due to the poor microphone?
You sound fine.
Yeah, it's okay.
All right then. Now what else? What else? Um, mm,
Well, one thing we can talk about is the need for alternative entertainment, really, because I think that in the coming years, that's going to be a bigger and bigger thing. And with the internet, there's just a lot more possibilities with it.
Yes. Before we could go on with that topic, I think I finally thought out the topic I was about to talk about.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, it goes like this. How far does edgy humor go, but without becoming degenerate? Because I'm supposed to tell the difference between actual degeneracy and simple edgy humor. Because well, there was a show from Netflix in which many people became outraged because it showed genitals from underaged characters, which I don't even understand. Is that supposed to be edgy or it's starting to become degenerate?
Under what context was it shown?
It depicted one of girl's genitals with a face.
Then it is. I mean, if you simply portray nudity, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, let's just call that Greek, for example. But if you...
But here's the thing. That was an underaged character.
No, yes, I'm telling that. If it is simply nudity, I mean, you will not get enraged if you show a baby, just a naked baby.
Yes.
What the hell? But the point is of the context I was talking about. If it is the focus of the scene, I mean, if the nudity is the object for, something, I mean, it's a morbosity. That's what I'm talking about. For example, you can show nudity in, I don't know, in many European films have nudity, but the nudity is not the object of the joke, for example. It's not the object of the something. Yes?
Oh, yes. I mean, I don't even understand why I'm slightly overreacting to that when and it sounds a little bit hypocritical given that I watch shows from Japan and those are considered very inappropriate in the West, especially in the US, but those are considered kids shows in Japan. They don't make the topic of nudity over the top. So those are still appropriate for children, but it is as if the West is seriously, pardon my French, but it is as if we are pussies.
Yeah. What I'll say is that when does it become degenerate? I would say it depends on the context in that it's portrayed. If it's portrayed as like, say, like this, whatever degeneracy, if that's portrayed as like being a positive, that's when it's to me it's just like this is just getting degenerate. I mean, if it's put as a way to poke fun at that thing, then I mean, it's not the same really. You don't understand what I'm saying?
Yes, most of the time the nudity I see it, or at least the violence I see in anime or the nudity, that's usually in the comedic context.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it does depend also because I do feel that over the past 2 decades actually, a lot of raunchy comedies it just doesn't do. I mean, it's just boring really because that's just been done before, and I find that as they get more and more extreme, it just to me it seems more and more desperate. Like for example, the series American Pie, like that. I mean, it might have been funny in 1999, but they just keep pulling the same gags to try to get more and more extreme, and it's not funny. It's boring, really. It's just it's weird because I mean, you're not you're just trying to up the ante totally until it just gets to the point that it's just degenerate, really.
Yes. What are your thoughts, Vergilius Rex?
Well, for example, if we talk about American Pie, I mean, there's the same thing I was talking with intention. For example, you can show romance, and then in American Pie, the intention of romance is completely a degenerate act. You can show marriage, and even marriage is degenerated into something of pure pleasure. And well, it's, as I said, the intent. I mean, and you don't have to be an art critic to judge whether the intent was immoral or degenerate or not.
I'm trying to look for that video that shows that show that I'm talking about. I can't because I forgot the name of that show. It's on Netflix, and I can't remember what is it called, nor when was that video uploaded. Okay, now Endeavor, your opinions on. Wait, have you watched Steven Universe? Because I don't actually watch that.
I know I haven't. Steven Universe. I haven't seen the show.
Oh, okay then. Let's forget about that. So moving on to a different topic. Your thing about alternative media.
Well, what I was saying about that is that as these fan bases tend to like lose faith in these series, you know, as people start to lose faith in Hollywood and all this other stuff, I think there's a real opportunity for people to come in and create content that you know, pushes a you know, either a reactionary, like anti-progressive message. I think that's a huge opportunity we have. So if you want an example, you know, a pattern that I constantly see happen is a certain series, like say Star Wars. You know, you'll get these the progressive news outlets. They'll start saying that it's sexist, that and then what will happen is the creators will be pressured into changing the series. The fans will hate it, and then they'll start leaving bad reviews, and then the creators then go on to say how horrible their fans are being. It pisses the fans off, and it really just like you can constantly see these series like kind of you know, degenerating. Really, they're really kind of just falling. I mean, obviously not falling apart just yet, but you can definitely see their decline. And I do feel that people are right now looking for cultural activities that aren't being, you know, taken over by ideologues, and you know, I think there's a real opportunity there.
Okay, I found the show I was talking about.
Okay.
I linked it on the chat on the right within this Hangout.
Okay, hold on.
There was major outraged.
Oh, okay.
Just note that I couldn't watch the show since I'm not subscribed to Netflix.
I haven't seen it either, but I mean, I guess it's by I guess it's a kind of a Family Guy type show. I'm actually seeing in the on the right hand screen seeing bad reviews for it. So, yeah, I kind of see what it's going to be like. Yeah, you know, I do probably think that this probably is another one of those shows that tries to be raunchy, but just ends up it ends up being more just desperate than actual funny. Because I find that's the real direction that a lot of the like I said earlier, a lot of the raunchy comedy is going.
Yeah. Now on the topic of alternative media, there is a slight problem with that. First of all, wouldn't those alternatives become perverted by leftists? I mean, we already have Netflix pushing shows that have slight liberal biases that more that I'm not even sure if it's being overblown out of proportion um, by conservatives unsubscribing from Netflix, or those are genuine concerns. Especially when I heard that George Soros has bought a lot of shares from Netflix.
Well, the idea that I'm talking about is that finding an alternative to that. So I mean, one that's not like people finding entertainment in something that's not being mass produced, mass commercialized by a big corporation.
Yeah.
So, for
Yes.
example, creating like you can create content online, maybe making short films of some kind on YouTube, or just like finding something to participate in that's outside of that's not being controlled by one of these massive corporations. That I think that's how alternative entertainment would be pushed. So when I say alternative entertainment, it's alternatives to things like Netflix, Hollywood, stuff like that.
Yeah. And here's the thing though. What if those new content creators end up being forced to insert a slight liberal bias, or even if there was no bias present, they'll end up having debates that involve with identity politics, such as gender roles or something, because that's going on in one course within film school that I'm in.
Well, I mean, the idea is that that people making alternative content, alternative entertainment, they wouldn't have to face those pressures because they're not being dictated by a film school or a studio or something like that. The idea is they can go around those kind of restraints that are being put on entertainment, which is pushing it in a leftward direction.
Um, oh, right then. Um, okay, now I can't think of anything else.
Well, I mean, so you're in a film school right now, correct?
Well, technically, I'm in a 4-year um, university with a minor. Well, I mean, I'm majoring in film and video, but I'm also a minor in music, and I'm thinking about changing my major, be, or go to a trade school because I am unable to join the program by around my second year because I'm struggling to do my coursework right.
Yeah, the point is that in your school, do you have these courses where they talk about like feminism and racism and all this other stuff, right?
Uh, within my major or generally?
Like for the film courses you're taking, you have like they talk about social justice issues.
No, just some slight discussions within those same courses. But as for but there are still a general education courses that involve with diversity and international issues. But I'm trying my best to avoid the ones that are severely affected by them and choose the ones that have the least amount of influence, such as for the diversity requirement, I chose jazz history, and that's somewhat suitable to me because that happens to be about music, and I love music. There
Yeah.
was, and well, I don't think it is as biased as before, given that it's true that the blacks innovated jazz, and I didn't say invent, just innovating, because well, it's mostly stemmed from classical music elements mixed in with African elements, so that's at least better compared to SJ social justice courses. I didn't get a good grade, given that I'm not actually good at writing essays.
Okay, well, so clearly it's the institution that it's a progressive institution. So
Yes, but
what's going to need to be done to create alternative content, alternative entertainment with a counter progressive narrative is you're either going to need to go around the institution or you're going to need to kind of sneak it in there. You know what I mean by that?
sneak what
So
in there?
like for example, you could write a story that subliminally has an anti-progressive narrative. That is possible to do. Now that is a lot harder. Um, Alternatively, you could try to go around the institution and create something on your own. Now that's a lot more difficult because uh, it's more difficult because you don't have the funding. But if you're doing that, you can create whatever message you want.
Yeah. To be clear, though, compared to the universities that got blown out of proportion in the media, mine is rather tame, though, and for some reason, within my speech class, which is required in my major, I managed to do a speech on free speech, and I actually subverted the expectations of the audience, especially by other speechwriters that did something about free speech, because I showed the conservative concerns of free speech rather than the liberal or centrist side, in which I got away with mentioning Mino Yiannopoulos and Richard Spencer. Um, However, just note that I actually failed that speech because I messed up the presentation. It has nothing to do with the subject matter. It's more on how I messed up the presentation. But I was actually applauded by my class, and they said it was good. It's just I should have done it better.
Well, okay, then I'd say you have an opportunity there that if you have an opportunity to speak your mind, share your views, then I definitely would recommend using that. Yeah, I mean, it's really just about finding where this institution that you're attending really stands on these things. So, there could be one that'll just shut you down immediately, and then there could be one that they'll be like, okay, we'll hear you out, and you kind of just need to see your situation and see what you can do with it.
Yeah, I mean, there were two other students that actually did a speech about free speech, but they only showed one side without the issues with censoring conservatives. But I interpret that's because they're simply not aware. They showed examples from Colin Kaepernick. Now, I did mention Colin Kaepernick in my speech too, but I shifted the focus from the left to the right, well, all the way to the alt right, and I made it clear that I am not, I do not support the alt right.
Mm-hmm.
And the fortunate thing is, no violence happened. I actually I had to put a disclaimer for other students to protect my life.
well, yeah, riding that line, that's kind of what you have to do sometimes. You kind of just have to be not so overt that they'll shut you down, but not too under the rate, not just complete conformity. So like that's kind of what I'm talking about in ways that you can kind of like hide a certain message in plain sight by having the message there, but not making it so overt that they're gonna know what you're doing.
Yes. But at the very least, there are plenty of conservatives at my institution, and they, but they're not actually really that conservative, even though there might be some Trump supporters, but there aren't that conservative, given that they're not actually aware of the reality throughout the country. For example, last year during the election, a few of my friends did support Trump, but they kept telling me that the alt-right supported Trump. The problem is that one person used the term in the wrong context, meaning anyone that supports Trump, and I tried to correct him. I do have a few friends that are willing to protect me, even though I made it clear that I'm not a, I'm not a supporter of either Trump or Clinton.
Okay. Yeah.
And
That is kind of something you'll see, and that is like a way that it is kind of a way that you'll often encounter that for people to shut you down. It's like, well, you support Trump, or therefore you're the same thing as Richard Spencer. It's kind of a tactic they have. It's like of just lumping everyone together. Yeah, you know what I mean?
yes, at least there were some slight grievances and warnings about the results of the election, but at least there weren't any riots or
Yeah.
overreactions, at least. And so it's tame compared to what happened at Yale or Missouri.
Yeah.
There were still some uncomfortable situations I saw, especially in a few opinions. For example, a few weeks ago, I hope I don't get doxxed when I'm about to say this on this live stream. Anyway, so I'm not even sure I should mention this.
All right. Well, yeah, you don't have to mention it, but if you don't want to, but so what I'm trying to say is that you have to find ways that you can get ideas out there, and entertainment, like we were talking about earlier, that is a way that ideas get spread, and if the right ever actually wants to be a cultural movement and actually make cultural change, we're going to need to start having creators of culture, really, of art, and that is easier said than done, but I definitely think that there is an opportunity there.
Yeah. The only hints I'm about to drop here about what I was about to say is that the person that was showcasing a music composer's showcase for the music department said something about the other students not being represented in their music because the composers were traditionally white males. And I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the exact words. And this is coming from someone who submitted a piece written in the Baroque style, or at least neo-Baroque, for for two violins, a cello, and a harpsichord, albeit with a basso continuo.
Well, one thing that I think that a mistake that a lot of these progressive institutions are making, and one thing that you can exploit is, just talk to people that like these composers and say, well, this is your favorite composer, and these institutions are saying, well, this guy's a white male. People will start to change their minds when they think they'll lose something they love. So, if someone loves Mozart or Bach or one of these composers, and then you'll have like one of these SJWs in college in your university say, well, he was a white male, and this is patriarchy and stuff like that. That's just a way that you can that's something you can connect with people on, and you can kind of bring them toward a anti-progressive stance, because they're attacking something that they love, and that's when people really start to make change their minds, when they're in danger of losing something that they actually appreciate.
You should be very careful with that, though, because that is dangerously close to simple wishful thinking. That if you say that simply if we tell people the truth, or if we show them that that which they love is disappearing, they will flock to our side, to our cause, and be a force that will push our agendas. Uh, I'm not saying that it wouldn't work, that it wouldn't have a force, a cultural force, but I'm saying that it is very close to being simply wishful thinking. Because, I mean, imagine what, I don't know, people from 50, 60 years ago would say about how we portray things now. Wouldn't wouldn't they see how, I don't know, nice cities have disappeared, how they are just polluted, or how, I don't know, their religion is approached? Wouldn't they be discussed? So we are using the same argument that so things that we hold dear are disappearing. We cannot just simply say, "Oh, it's disappearing. We must do something about it." That's an organization that's on potential only. It's weak. That's what I'm trying to say. There's need to be another force that is able to organize precisely that. Otherwise, it is wishful thinking.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can't only have that, but that is a way to get someone who is otherwise uninterested actually interested.
Yeah, but I was talking, for example, on the context of the alt-right, that it's a very weak movement. I mean, it is not even a political movement. Many people think, and especially people of the alt-right itself, think that it is the movement and that it will create the cultural energy in order to create a countercurrent. But again, that's childish. That's just, it will because it is the truth, and that's very naive. You need the force, you need organization. I'm not talking violent force, but you need the force in the sense of energy. Yes, exemplarity, organization. That's the sort of thing that is the gravitas in the society, not just the presence of a certain type of media.
Yes, yeah, I would agree with that, but I would say that media does push people in certain directions, and having some control over that you're going to need that.
I mean, of course, but it is not the push or where the left will be defeated, so to speak. So I actually have to get going now. So it
Okay.
was nice talking to you. Thanks for having me, Louis. So goodbye.
Thank you, Vergilius Rex. So did you read that chat on the left? I mean, right?
Yes, I did. So what was the did he offer? He didn't offer a counter argument to that.
Myself offering that counter argument.
Well, you know what I would say is that you need to do is you need to get out. You need to get the conversation away from you need to break the narrative of, well, this guy of the, well, you know, these guys were oppressed, you know, the minorities are oppressed, the women are oppressed, and you really need to break that narrative, because that's just their way of delegitimizing just traditional Western culture, the stuff that, you know, you and I probably appreciate. What you need to do is, what I usually just say is that well, I think that they created a great culture, and it's something that I'm proud of, and I don't believe that it was a negative, and it's something I won't apologize for. And you know, if they don't like it because, you know, well, he's a white male or something, I just tell them I don't care. But I don't need to justify it. If that's what I say usually.
Are you talking myself or yourself?
Well, that's what I usually would say. So when somebody says to me like, well, this movie from 1965, it's just a bunch of white men. What I just say is, well, I don't care. So what? It's a great movie. It's a part of my culture. These are, uh, and it's something I appreciate. And if you don't like it, well, I tell them tough. Because I don't try to explain. I don't try to give them an explanation to what they to what they're trying to achieve. So I won't try to justify it to them, because once you try to justify yourself to progressives, they've beaten you. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yes.
Yeah. So what I use. So the thing is, you can't try to explain how not racist you are, because they'll call you that anyway. So you're when they say like that, this all this classical music is so racist and stuff. You can't try to say, you can't try to just uh write it off in terms that you think will satisfy them. You have to just reject you just have to reject what they're saying outright.
Yes, by disagreeing with that completely.
Okay. Well, what would you say then?
um, I would just simply say I completely disagree with that, but I would immediately drop that because there's no way to explain it since this is a cultural reaction. So I can't objectively say the positive of that kind of music, given that music is subjective.
Well, you're not saying that. Yeah, the music's subjective, but the argument being used is that it's illegitimate because they're white men. They're white men, and you just have to just reject that and say no. That you don't care about that standard, and they don't have a response to it.
Mhm. So I immediately say you don't care about this standard, and
Well, no. What
simply
you say is
drop.
no. Okay. What you would say is um you would say that they created great culture. So say someone like Bach or Beethoven, whoever, just say they created great culture. It's a great work of music, and it's worth appreciating. And your standard of them being white males, well, it's like that doesn't phase me. That's what I just say.
All right, then I shall try that. Now, to be clear,
The idea is you don't want to play by their rules. You don't ever want to find yourself you don't want to try to justify yourself to someone else, to a leftist standards, because once they've done that, they'll beat you.
all right. Now, what else should we talk about?
Well, I don't know. You're a stream man. I mean, I'd say that well, culture definitely matters, and if you're going to change people's hearts and minds, you're gonna need it, and it's something that needs to be in the discussion. Are you subscribed to the channel The Iconoclast?
Noah.
Uh, well, he's a British nationalist, and he makes most of his videos are about the EU, Islam, immigration, and like censorship in Britain. But he made a video recently about filmmaking, in which he proposed people essentially doing what I had said earlier, is creating alternative entertainment. And that's one way that you're going to be able to actually influence people. And yeah, because contemporary entertainment, it's getting dry, and there's an opportunity there.
Is he an alt-writer though?
I mean, he doesn't talk about like race realism or anything like that. I mean, he is a nationalist, but I don't know if I'd call him an alt writer. I mean, he doesn't talk about like genetics and stuff like that. But highly recommend his channel. I do enjoy it.
Okay, are his followers alt-writers? Alt-writers though.
Probably some of them are, but I mean,
Okay. All right then. I just thought of something. Remember when I linked you to that video to Dr. Lehman about him criticizing Paul Joseph Watson? Well, he didn't just criticize modern popular culture, but he also criticized modern architecture. Now, there's a slight flaw in that argument about degenerating architecture, and that's when you put the architecture from the 19th century to the reactions of the contemporary people. I'm not even sure what were the opinions of the people at the time, but there were a few anecdotes that claimed that Gothic architecture at the time, which by already was a revival of Gothic architecture from the high Middle Ages, being very ugly. And I'm not even sure that's equivalent to saying that modern skyscrapers are, with no effort put in, being considered ugly today.
well, I with the architecture thing, to me, this is one of the most important. This is one of the real tragedies in of Western society for the last few decades and 100 years maybe now. But I really feel that architecture degenerating. I mean, it's pretty darn apparent because these cities they're no longer beautiful. They're just covered with these massive glass and steel skyscrapers. Just they have no inspiration put into them, and I mean it's really kind of destroyed something beautiful, I would say. So
Yes, in fact, I think there are a few shadows of the beautiful architecture within the downtown area of the city where I live, albeit out in one neighborhood outside of the downtown area, in which many houses would date back to maybe the early 20th century, and that's considered a historic district. Big houses resembling Victorian times. And
yeah.
I thought to myself about, well, if I were rich, I would own a piece of land within my own state and hire an architecture to build a stone villa, but it has to be within a red area. But this is maybe a pipe dream, given that I'm not even sure how many architectures are willing to build houses in an Italian villa style or even a French chateau style, albeit small, since I don't necessarily need many rooms.
Well, I mean, you could find one to. I'm sure you could find one to put in. The thing is, though, the problem with architecture today, I get the sense that the people that are building modern architecture don't value the country and the countries that they're building it on, because it has no effort put into it. It's just it's made for commercial purposes and that only, and that's a real problem. And I'd say it's kind of just a result of materialism. It's the result that the idea that the only thing that matters is the here and now. The only thing that matters is the profit. You're not building it part of anything bigger than you. You're not building it for any purpose. It's just, it's just for money, and that's the real problem.
Yeah. Yeah, but and did Dr. Lehman criticize on that part?
Well, I mean, I think Paul Joseph Watson. I'm not a huge fan of him. I think he doesn't. I think he's kind of just a propagandist, really, and B, his arguments are just kind of really sluggish, and C, he's just kind of what I'd call, I guess you could say, a conservative. I mean, he's not
Or retrograde, using Fox's terms.
Well,
although,
I mean, I say Paul Joseph Watson. I think what Dr. Lehman's the point he was making was that like the video was not very well researched, and really he's just kind of, I mean, do you want to talk about his about the points that Paul Joseph Watson made, or like the idea of architecture itself?
Let's try maybe Watson.
Well, okay. Well, with Watson, the guy doesn't do. I mean, he works for Infowars. It's a sensationalist site. I think the guy really is. I don't think he's a very good presenter, in my opinion.
Yes, especially when he misrepresented one art exhibition in the UK that shows a giant butt, in which that was meant to stir debate. It wasn't meant to be serious.
Yeah. Though I will say though that I do agree with the premise that I do agree that modern art and architecture is very poor. I agree with that premise.
Yes, but we have to be very careful on the examples we present, because sometimes it might be intentional shit posting, especially on that example with that fountain that turns out to be a toilet, as Dr. Lehman pointed out.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that. And I remember he had said like there was 2 sculptures of an ass or something like that, and he said one of them was Paul Joseph Watson said it was horrible, and then he said that another one he thought it was good.
Yes, there was that double standard that for some reason even the far left pointed that out.
I do agree Paul Joseph Watson's I think Paul Joseph Watson's a moron. I'm not debating that.
He basically validated the left's point accidentally with that double standard that other conservatives are trying to avoid. I mean, it's although to be fair, I disagree with you with him. I mean, with you calling Watson a conservative, since it's not the same as calling Shapiro or what are the other conservatives there in the U.S.
Like Dennis Prager or them.
Maybe yes.
Okay, I think I should probably say what I mean when I say that. Essentially, what I mean by that is that they're pretty much they're trying so hard to justify themselves to the left, as in they're basically accepting all the left's premises. They accept all the left's previous victories, and essentially they're trying so desperately to present themselves as something that they're trying to get the left's approval, and really what they're doing is they're playing them at their own game, and they will lose at that. So that's my objection to people like Dennis Prager and Paul Joseph Watson.
They're yes, although they're not necessarily the same in terms of political views.
Especially
especially given the age differences between the two.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, just in general, like for example, they'll constantly, use Candace Owens as like an example of how not racist they are. They'll have to like bring her out and say, "Oh, look, here's a black woman that's that shares our views." And the problem with that is that what the problem is that you're just trying to check off the left's boxes that they set out for people. So you're just trying to satisfy these diversity requirements that they set up. And the problem is that they're going to beat you at that game, because if you think that gives you clout, well, they can walk out 10 minorities and say, well, here's these people that agree with us. So it's a failing strategy.
So a better strategy would be do not mention the race of that person, but still present the person his views.
Well, I mean, it depends on what their arguments are. Sure, if they have a good argument, sure, use the argument, but you can't use like their race as like as fodder, because that's what the left does, and the left will beat you at that, because the reality is that there's a lot more minorities on the left than there are on the right. That's just the reality.
Yeah, if you go by the polling statistics. So that's out of the window. Now, do you know, here's a question that I've been wondering. Is there a difference between a normal conservative and a paleo conservative, or at least a libertarian and a paleo conservative? And when I say libertarian, I'm not talking about radical libertarians or anarcho-capitalists, because while I consider myself, well, the labels I'm referring to self is not always consistent, though. I consider myself broadly right-wing with many libertarian views, but I also sometimes call myself a paleo conservative, but it also doesn't fit me because I'm on the fence with gay rights. The thing to point out is that I would not support gay marriage, but I am for civil unions.
Well, what I'll say is that a paleo conservative is a lot more traditionalist. I mean, versus a neoconservative who they're a lot more focused on things like low taxes. They spreading democracy through war. Paleo conservatives, on the other hand, they're a lot more. How do I say this? They focus on tradition a lot more. They seem to have a lot more. They seem to focus on first principles a lot more. So I'd be a lot more closer to a paleo conservative. Neoconservatives, I think, are the problem with they're what's wrong with the right. I think that position is a very flawed one.
And to be clear, that label might not fit me, given that I don't know that much about Patrick Buchanan.
Well, I mean, generally, the paleocons are a lot more nationalistic, and they generally would oppose a lot of the social changes of the 20th century, whereas neocons might accept a lot of them, but oppose any further. And I'd say that's the real problem with neocons, is that they seem to already accept a lot of the left's victories, but then they don't. What they're trying to conserve is something that's dying, because because really the left's ideology it has to constantly push in a leftward direction. So when you're just looking at that and yelling stop, you're not going to actually achieve anything. So you really need to push in the opposite direction, I would say. So I'd say that paleocons are a lot. I mean, I'm a lot more similar to a paleocon. I am certainly not a neocon.
Okay, because I don't know what position am I at? I obviously not a neoconservative, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily that much of a traditionalist, given that, first of all, while I am not an atheist at all, I'm not that much, I'm not really that religious either, but I
Okay.
still believe in God,
Okay.
but I'm not that religious. And you do realize that, as I pointed out on the chat on the right, obviously, I obviously alt right isn't the option.
Well, yeah. What I'll say is that I am a traditionalist. I'm a reactionary. So I mean, I'd be because I believe that in order to actually have in order for a conservative movement to ever succeed, it needs to undermine generally the premises that are the left is based on. And the real problem with the right is that they don't do that, and that they mostly just accept a lot of them, but try really hard to prevent further victories from the left. But once you've accepted their premises, they will win.
Yes. I mean, let's see. I'm for obvious. Let's see. Um, wow. I think most of the principles I have are rather shallow, other than promoting Western culture.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would have to expand on that. Like, so what would you say what are some aspects of Western culture? Like, what are you trying to promote?
That's rather difficult to say. Well, there is the classical music, especially with newer compositions of classical music of any style. Then there's the food. But at the same time, I also agree that whites must not be a minority.
Yes, I absolutely agree. But I mean, with that part, because I do think that it, pretty much anything that I want, if that happens, it's probably gonna be impossible. But okay, so would you say that the West for you is it a set of values, or is it a people, a culture, and a heritage?
That would be. Is it possible to say both?
I mean, you can say both, but I mean, when you say the West, do you think of it as more things like democracy, or do you think of it as more like, the people and their culture and their traditions?
That would be an emphasis on the latter.
Yeah, yeah. It's like for me, what I say is that um, what really for me, what the West is its people, its culture, its history, and its traditions, and its land, of course. And you know, one thing that really frustrates me in modern discourse is that a lot of people seem to think it's they seem to think that it's an idea, which that and that people are really just interchangeable, and that's something I totally disagree with, because um a culture dies with its people, and if at the rate that we're going, Western culture is just it's dying off, and uh really the point is we need to that's what needs to be promoted and preserved, because people don't live, fight, and die for an idea. It's for something more concrete than that.
Yes, but how are we able to justify that when leftists always cite the oppression of Native Americans?
Well, okay, good question. What I say to that is what I say is that history is a game of conquest, that
Yes,
people did in the past what they needed to do to survive. The Turks took over Turkey from the Greeks. The Arabs took over North Africa. and my ancestors took over Canada. And what I say is that that doesn't delegitimize it. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of who my ancestors were. And I won't apologize for that because it's what created me, and it's what created the culture and heritage that I was born into. And that is not, and it's something I will not apologize for it because that'll delegitimize it. I'm proud of who I am. That's my response when they say that.
Yes. And this, well, the same thing probably cannot be said within Latin America, with a major exception of the southern cone, given of how perverted the Spanish were.
Well,
in
I mean,
a general sense of twisted.
Okay, continue.
That was it. In the general sense of them being twisted, even though they did improve those cultures, but not that by much.
But okay. I mean, I don't know too much about Latin America. I do know the situation that the Spanish colonization of Latin America, there were a lot more casualties. But I think you have to just say that. I mean, in North America, what you have to just say is that history is a game of conquest, and you don't apologize for being on the winning side, because once you do that, once you try to apologize, then you've allowed them to delegitimize you, and then that's their card to tear down pretty much anything that you've accomplished. Anything that you've accomplished.
Yes.
So I mean, you can say, well, this is the land that your ancestors created, and you're not going to apologize for that because it made a sure. I mean, it was through war, but history. Look at all the war in history. I mean, China had wars with hundreds of millions of casualties over the centuries. They're not apologizing for anything. Turkey had slavery, genocide, all that stuff. They're not apologizing. And it's not like you're gonna just say it's not like we're not saying we're gonna go kill a bunch of people or anything like that. We're just saying that we're not giving away what we've built.
Yes. So is there anything else we could talk about? Because I'm still waiting for another person. Back in which he responded to me at 10:09 that he'll be coming in 20 minutes.
Okay, no problem. Yeah. What I'll say is that the one narrative in the West that really needs to be shattered is it's that narrative though, the one that delegitimizes you. So, in North America, Australia, New Zealand, they say it's stolen land, and then in Europe they say, well, you colonized the rest of the world, and then so you need to accept this now. You just need to reject that. You can't use it. You can't try to justify it in leftist terms, because you're not going to be able to do that, and they'll just delegitimize you. So just have to stand up and say that we're proud of who we are and we don't care.
And then comes the mental gymnastics with that, because I remember about a month and a half ago in which I was talking a TED Ed video, not TED Ed Talks X, not the same thing. It was an animated video, and it was talking about the Inca Empire. There were a few too many comments that said something along the lines of, if the Spanish hadn't conquered the Incas and the Aztecs, they would have become en par with the Europeans, which obviously that is rather delusional.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, that probably
and
is.
Then I debated with them by saying that the Spanish gave them a lot of benefits despite the slaughtering of those natives. And that includes different new kinds of food and technology. I mean, how would the Incas and the Aztecs have progressed to be on par with Europeans without discovering glass
Well,
and what uses?
if they could have been on par with the Europeans, they wouldn't have been destroyed by them.
Yeah, they couldn't defend themselves, and besides, the narrative with them stealing land, they shouldn't say that, given that one, those were nomadic people, with the few exceptions of the Aztecs and the Incas. So, and two, there were no laws to protect their property. They're basically, well, in a rather communistic society with no idea on how to understand private property.
Yeah.
So they can't just claim something without a land deed or something.
Well, yeah. I mean, and just the other point is that like the narrative tends to be that the entire world outside the West was this all peaceful, utopias, and then the evil Europeans came along and murdered everyone and ruined everything. Yeah, I mean, the narrative is complete bullshit. Just what you have to really say is that it was war, just like any other war. I mean, it happened, and don't apologize for it because you don't need to. You don't need to be. You don't need to. You don't need to apologize for the fact that your ancestors won a war. And
Yes.
it's like the Incas and the Incas, the Aztecs. They all murdered each other. They all
Yes.
ripped other people's hearts out. I mean, they weren't saints either.
I mean, I pointed that out to them about the human sacrifices, but one commenter then said that they were sure glad that the Spanish stopped the human sacrifices, but them slaughtering the natives and then putting them backwards outweighed the stoppings of human sacrifices, despite the technology. I mean, however, there's something that's been baffling me, and it is as if they have a point. I mean, in recent times, we don't seem to be that civilized as centuries in the past, as in the Europeans, given of how materialistic and greedy they have become. So there's one thing that left is right somewhat, but I still reject the narrative about the natives being noble savages. And I can't believe I said the word savage like that.
Well, yeah, I think that, like I said before, just if everyone was apologizing for everything, every war in history, I mean, there would be no legitimate countries on Earth. So it's like, I mean, you don't need to apologize for it. And certainly you don't owe anyone anything for it. So you don't need to give away what your ancestors built because they fought a war and they killed people, and every civilization on Earth has been like that, and that's just kind of how human nature works. So
Yes, although the case can't be said about Latin America, given that many of them have two different ancestries, so they are very divided.
well, I mean,
And
yeah,
the others are purely towards one ancestry,
yeah,
which is natives, and a few other pure whites, especially in the other southern cone.
yeah, yeah. That is the situation. There is quite the divide in what's it called in Latin American civilization.
I mean, I'm not even sure if those countries are really influenced by Spanish culture or Spanish culture actually barely influenced them, and instead it was a natural evolution of those cultures that are still influenced by the Spaniards. But how much they were influenced depends on the area I mean, that should be in par with Western civilization since the Spanish colonized them, but instead, those became third world countries, and the original Spanish influence became downplayed over time.
Well, I mean, it's clear. It's still clearly there, though. I mean, Christianity came from Europe. There,
Yes.
a lot of the structures of government came from there. Yeah, I mean, it certainly is Spanish and Portuguese influence, and I mean the language too. It's
Yes.
certainly in South America.
Yes, but those wouldn't be part of Western culture due to the very different genetics in the peoples down there.
Well, yeah, I
But
mean,
am I talking too much about race realism? Because I normally consider myself as a race realist too, but the reason I'm not into alt-right is because I disagree with how the knowledge is used. And I'm still rather on the fence of that because I have an acquaintance that told me that race realism can be debunked, but the issue is that I can't because I don't know much about genetics.
I don't know enough about it to comment on race realism. I don't. I don't know enough about it to actually say one way or the other. So it's a topic I don't really talk about, and I don't really talk about because I can't really contribute to it.
I just
Because I'd like to actually, if I'm gonna make a video on something, I want to actually have it something that I think I can actually am knowledgeable about. So yeah, race realism for me. That's just don't know enough about it.
I mean, if those countries had not had a lot of crime rates, would these countries still be similar to Western cultures, but still different enough to be different from European cultures?
Well,
Because what
I
is
don't know.
causing the high crime rate? Well, you could say poverty and I would accept that, but then cultures downstream from race, and that's something I have to acknowledge that too. But that would require a dramatic change on how governments are structured there. And
Hello.
hello,
Hi.
Nazbol.
Hi, I'm back. How's
Well,
Good.
what were you guys talking about?
Many topics.
Well, I just heard something about this. It would be very difficult to dismantle the government or something.
Yeah. The closest that has improved a Latin American country under a dictatorship was Pinochet, and that's because Chile was a majority white country anyway.
Pinochet, I think, might have worked. I'm not sure about the integralists in Spain. Not in Spain, not Brazil. I mean, sorry, that was a mix-up. The integralists were like, they were like an odd group because like they're sort of like fascist, but like they have like this weird like economic view on the world, and they also were sort of like would incorporate Catholic values into their thing, very similar to like what Austria did and how the Iron Guard did incorporated Eastern Orthodoxy into their party.
Yeah. Well, what I will say is that I think that I don't know enough of, again, I said I don't know enough about like race realism to say what the cause of these things is. Although if you do want to know about Pinochet, Coach Red Pill actually lived under Pinochet, so he made several videos on that. But one thing you will observe in Latin America though is that it's very segregated. So there'll be white neighborhoods, there'll be black neighborhoods, there'll be mixed, there'll be native, and I mean, and you're kind of starting to see that in the West too.
I'm not even sure if freedom of association is allowed in Latin America, given that I haven't heard anything involved with anti-discrimination laws about forcing neighborhoods to accept people. I mean, accept integration.
Well, okay. I think in Latin America they aren't like they don't talk about like diversity. At least not in my experience. I don't know too much about Latin America, but I don't see like so much of this like diversity is our strength talk and all this other nonsense that you see in with like SJWs. I think they're kind of just letting it happen a lot more naturally, and what's happening is kind of the ghettoization, which I think to me that really just shows why multiculturalism is stupid because this. I mean, we see what happens when you just let people choose. They end up choosing to live with people that are more similar to them, and it really isn't building a very stable society. Knowing that, and yet constantly importing more, people from third world.
I mean, the best example I could see is Brazil, in which it is as if it is three different countries in one.
Yeah.
If you count the mixed whites and black areas.
Brazil is into three parts: the 46%, the 56%, the 66%.
Which means
well, yeah. Well, pretty much what I'm saying is that, and actually another place like that is South Africa, and I've actually been to South Africa. Yeah, it's just extremely even with all this like diversity stuff. I mean, even in America, they constantly self-segregate, and like it just really, to me, it's proof that like the idea of multiculturalism just doesn't work because people don't follow it naturally.
so. Should we support maybe a change or a repeal of the 1964 Civil Rights Act and support freedom of association?
It's hard to say. I don't know too much about I don't know too much about policy just yet. But I do think that's kind of what's just gonna. I just think that is kind of what's gonna happen because.
Or a restructure of that amendment, or just like to restructure it to make it more effective, at the very least.
Yeah. Because I mean, I don't see the current way things are being run. I think that's just gonna end in disaster, really. So yeah, I mean, definitely, I think.
Do you think there's gonna? Because you're talking about South Africa, do you think something's gonna boil over with the whole the killing of the white farmer folk?
Check next year is their election. That'll be really interesting to see, because pretty much they have three major parties. They have the ANC, which is Nelson Mandela's party. They're a left party. They have the EFF, which is a far left party, and they full on want to murder all the Boers. And then there's the DA, which is kind of a center right party. If they win, then it might not end in disaster, but the way it's looking right now, it's looking like they're within a few years there's probably going to be conflict there. And to me that. Oh, go ahead.
Will it be the first 21st century genocide?
It might be, but I mean, actually, I don't think that there's been genocides in the 21st century already, though. I'm pretty sure. But no, what I was gonna say though is that it'll be an interesting situation to watch because, I mean, South Africa is a liberal democracy, and I think that if this ends up going badly, I think it's just proof that multiculturalism in a liberal democracy, it's just. I think it's proof that it's just a failure because, you can have all these laws and stuff about anti-discrimination and stuff, but if the people vote to abolish one of the people, what's stopping them from doing it?
So could multiculturalism work in a non-liberal democracy?
No.
Have you looked in Singapore?
I mean, yeah, Singapore, they just the entire, it's like forcefully done because they want to stop it from exploding.
Well, then again, everyone there looks Asian, so it's not like it's really like you can tell that much.
Well,
like
I mean, you will. Well, I mean, for them they can, because you have to understand that, like, I mean, in America you wouldn't, or Canada or wherever, in the West, there isn't a big difference between a Malaysian and Chinese, but in Asia there is. So, like, for example, the Indians and Pakistanis hate each other. So,
yeah, you can.
but
Yeah,
what I'm pretty much saying is that, yeah, I think that pretty much it'll be interesting to see in the next few years with South Africa because, uh, in my opinion, I think that's just kind of proof that the current path that the West is on right now, I think it's not gonna end well for us really, and for, well, anyone really. So as for the question, do I think multiculturalism can work in a non-liberal democracy? Uh, I no, and not in the current way it's being practiced today. But if it's a lot more like, free association, free if it's kind of like a situation in, say, the Soviet Union, how there's, like, the
if like the culture, if the other groups have like a more common interest compared to like a state like somewhere like the United States, for like a lot of the minorities have much more like different like they're like what they want is much different than like what like everyone else wants, and like that's what the problem is. I would assume. Am I correct?
well, yeah, that is going to be a problem, because the
Like
problem
this,
is right now is that people, they have to vote for the same leaders, meaning that,
no one's gonna get their special interests except for that one group.
exactly, yeah, that's
And
the problem.
so like a multicultural society could work if the people there all have the same vested interest. So like a lot of the people, I think it's some I don't know where like the multicultural, I don't even know, maybe like the Azeris in like Iran. I assume because they're probably not as like, because I mean the they're more Azeris in Iran right now than there are in Azerbaijan. So I mean, because they sort of have like the same sort of cultural history, and they're also both Shiite. I assume it sort of works out.
Well, I think that what would work, because the current way that things are shaping up, it's looking like there's going to be a lot of different factions. They're going to have a lot of different interests, and they're going to end up going up against. There's going to be a lot of conflict between them. Like, you could look at, like, the Islam and Muslims in Europe. I mean, as an example. I think, could multiculturalism work if each group had some sense of autonomy? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, maybe say, like, in, like,
The Soviet Union. If you want to bring an example back, try to explain that more in depth.
sorry. Oh yeah,
You want to
What
explain?
I was saying was Soviet Union or Russian Empire or something like that. Like, for example, in
They had their own
what's the country
republics.
called? Like
They
Kyrgyzstan or something like that.
they had like the own autonomous republics.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, they had their own republics. Those ones had their own kind of, like, peoples in them.
There was
Uh,
like the Azerbaijani one, the Armenian one, the Georgian one, the
yeah, kind of like
Uzbek
that.
one, and they're all under one nation, but they all sort of had their own little state within it to operate from. And what the only place that sort of had like, there was one state that was made to like diffuse conflict, and that was Nagorno-Karabakh between the Armenian Azerbaijani border, and he solid created it so it wouldn't cause too much infighting. And when the Soviet Union dismantled, there was a war between Armenia and Azerbaijan over who would have control, because there were more, I think, ethnic Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, and Armenia ended up winning the war and having like their own. It's almost like similar to the Serbia-Albania issue. I did a research paper on that, so I sort of know that. So I sort of know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's a lot more sustainable of a system. I do think that I mean, it would kind of like look more like, I guess, an empire rather than like a state, a single state.
Or
I
like
think
what?
that's a lot more plausible of a solution.
Or like what?
Because for example,
You know what the
oh, go
original
ahead.
plan? You know what the for Franz Ferdinand original plan was for Austria-Hungary? He was gonna like sort of like he was gonna do something similar to this, where like because all the groups like sort of fighting, like the Czechs, the Austrians, the Hungarians, and he was gonna like sort of establish all like states within them, and it was
Yes.
and they were if you know that, right?
Yes,
It,
like
yeah,
they were actually going to consider making a tri. Like before he died, he was considering making a tri monarchy, as in one with the Slavs.
yeah. So I mean, the Serbs really fucked themselves over in World War One and killing Franz Ferdinand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like to me that makes a lot more sense than what we're doing right now.
Yeah,
That
like,
actually. Oh
like
yeah, go ahead.
we're like trying to like the multicultural there for with that in like America's like you really just don't have like you don't have like we try to like make them all just have a cohesion together. Sort of like saying like this one's gonna have their own special position, so like put them in their state, and then you put them in like their little part, but they'll all be under one sort of banner.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, I don't know if I mean, I'm not saying like, pick up people in trucks and like, ship them off to these places. But what I'm saying is that like, because the real problem that we're going to encounter is that we're going to have different factions or the, different interest groups, all voting in one electorate and only one of them will get their way. And then, it's going to be, and it's going to just result in conflict to get, with between them. I think maybe not only racial, but also cultural, all these other things. I think that this is going to be a problem we're going to see in the future.
I think I just thought of something when we were talking about multiculturalism, and I think I know one piece of entertainment that, while it does have a slight liberal bias, it does have a good critique about multiculturalism. Can either of you guess what it was that?
Avatar, maybe?
The next one.
Aliens. I'm just naming off James Cameron movies.
I meant The Legend of Korra.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that one.
I haven't seen it.
Oh,
yeah. I'll be back in 1 second. Hold on.
Okay. So maybe I can't discuss about that without spoiling. Right, Nazbol?
Yeah.
Damn. Then I'm going to drop that.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to watch it, really.
Why is that?
I'm not probably going to watch Legend of Korra. I'll probably watch something a little more interesting. But if you want to spoil it, go ahead. I don't care.
Okay, then. I was about to say, that show isn't as good as the original series. And the first season was somewhat poorly written. And there was a little bit of shoehorning towards a lesbian subcontext.
Oh yeah, I
at
heard
the
about
very
that.
end.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
I mean, I'm not even sure if I should be surprised about that being inserted there, or was just poorly written.
All right, I'm back.
I mean, I think all like the BLT characters they like to add in TV shows to sort of go off the conversation we had on the last stream. Literally was they always try to push it in because they want to be like, oh, we're so inclusive and all that homo shit. Gotta I mean, if you want a good argument just against homosexuality, stuff like that, watch classical theist video on it. But it's just they just like to push it. They like to push it to audiences where their minds are feeble and will be like, this is pretty good. They'll sort of get conditioned to it. So you don't see many of the older shows have like all those things going on. You'll see it like now and again, but they always like to put it on the more like kids and teenage shows more than they do more like adult centered like for or more content for adult like a more adult demographic.
Okay, because I think we that's a topic we could discuss of that, but at a later point in the stream because that's actually a that's not the topic I was about to talk about when I brought up the Legend of Korra. So are you here, Endeavor?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, the reason I brought up the Legend of Korra and do you mind if I spoil that show for you, Endeavor? Because
Yeah, go ahead.
Noswell doesn't care.
I don't care. Go ahead.
Okay, the first season of that show had featured a city in which four elements lived together seemingly peacefully within that one city, and it functioned similarly to New York City of the US along with Hong Kong. It was inspired by that. However, it's when someone travels inside a city where there is a critique of multiculturalism in which there were factions fighting over each other on government representation, especially um, um, when there was a conflict with the Water Tribe against the others.
Okay.
Although that actually became a problem during the second season. But let's stick with the first. The city was out of balance. But I'm rather surprised, and I brought this up because I'm rather surprised about bringing up a critique towards multiculturalism back in 2012, and I didn't even realize that at the time. I mean, that would have been politically incorrect today.
Yeah.
And it
Well,
was subtle.
Yeah, you sort of see like the if it's multicultural, it has to have like a sort of a shared interest or like a like sort of like Yugoslavia or like all like those like pan-Arab sort of movements during the Arab Cold War and whatnot. Like it sort of has to be like that, where it's less like let's just like sort of have random cultural groups or like random groups just like sort of orgy together and sort of have like groups that have relatively shared interests but will have differences here and there can sort of unite because their major goal will be very similar. So let's unite under that.
but look how it ended in Yugoslavia.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yes.
yeah, but Yugoslavia I can sort of see different because the Croats were like Catholic, the Bosnians were Muslim, the Serbs were like Orthodox, and they are all like. I'm not sure if not a lot of people were on board with the socialist sort of thing, and so all that sort of boiled over.
Well, yeah. I mean, I mean that what I'm afraid of is the same thing happening in the West.
But what I'm trying to say was trying to like the whole point of the whole country getting made in the first place, not like the whole how it ended.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess it like socialism was their binding idea.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Yugoslavia didn't start off as it started as a kingdom.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, it was
It's
created
all-
after World War One as the Kingdom of Yugoslavia.
It was created as a kingdom after the partition of the Austro-Hungarian Empire,
Yes.
and then during World War II, it became a puppet and a member of the Warsaw Pact.
So yeah, it became communist after the Second World War.
Yeah, that was pretty gay.
Yeah, well, every communist country is so. But no, I think well, I don't know. I kind of look at Yugoslavia as like an example of the ticking time bomb that kind of multiculturalism really presents. Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Because I mean, yeah, you know, people aren't killing each other on the streets today, but let's like, you know, give it 20 more years, give it another huge another huge demographic shift. Give it a economic crisis. Give it a couple more, violent rallies, and well, we'll see what happens. It doesn't just because people aren't fighting each other now doesn't mean it's not always going to happen.
But one thing I has to work out is that all the groups have to sort of have like a relatively vested interest.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would need to have it. You would need to, have something that people actually get behind.
Yeah, I mean, one that was going to form was going to be Egypt and Syria were going to try to unite themselves, but really couldn't because they were relatively too different. Because the Sykes-Picot agreement sort of like fucked them over. Like with the whole territory, like because like the way that the countries were drawn was more or less you're doing territory for the British and the French, less to do it like the inhabitants of the area. It really fucked things up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if the borders are redrawn today, you sort of have like I don't know what it would be like. I mean, Syria might as well just be Syria and Jordan. This gives Jordan like all of Israel, and then gives Syria, Lebanon. Just have that be like the Christian. Like make that like your Christian state in the Middle East. Well, technically Cyprus is that, but they're Greeks. So, I mean, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, point is though that like whenever there's different factions in a civilization, it always seems to be conflict, and I think that I just think we're headed on that direction if we don't fix things, because civil discourse is getting worse, and people's identitarianism is kind of just increasing, and I really think though the idea that many centrists and many liberals are saying is that we need to get rid of identity politics. Delusional, because the reason that won't happen is because it's powerful. It gets things done, and when you're going to ask the left to give up their strong weapon, yeah, right. I mean, so you're going to need to.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Plus, it's sort of like you sort of need to like sort of have like a shared goal and an identitarian concept in some way will be one way of accomplishing that. Look at I don't know.
Well, I mean, yeah, because any solution you'd come to, you would need to think of pretty much everyone in the civilization, and it would need to be like a consensus, kind of a compromise. So yeah, I mean, you can't just say you can't just only think about yourself, but at the same time, you have to actually have you actually have to be standing up for yourself, or else people will take advantage of you.
Yeah, because when you get rid of like the whole identitarian thing, you just sort of like eliminate all of like the things that build up a person, and just sort of have it like, oh, they're a person.
Yeah, like they're a doctor or something like that, or they're
like a gamer, like something like it's just like their occupation. Like it's not like Valkyrie, it's not like me, a Mediterranean struggle who's like like Mediterranean and like Asian. So like I can go off of that. I can say I'm Catholic. I can say I have a big nose, like big nose gang. So like I can sort of like go off of all those traits instead of like. So I could go like become like Mediterranean nationalist and just like unite all of the Mediterranean countries, just ask for reunification of Spain, Italy, and Greece or some stupid shit like that. But like, you know how bad that would turn out. But I mean,
well, okay. What I'm saying though is that that stuff's not. I mean, like kind of the identitarianism on the left. That's not going away because it's too effective.
yeah,
Meaning the right needs to incorporate stuff like that. But at the same time, any consensus that like a civilization is going to come to, it's going to need to require, multiple. It's going to need to require, people to actually to actually agree on something.
Yeah, like that's why I could say it didn't really work in Yugoslavia because the religions are too balkanized, and that's probably like the biggest factor in what will keep a country unified because it. I think one way think of Italy, like when that was unified, the north part of Italy, like the white part, and like and like the Berber part of Italy, they're sort of very culturally different.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Because like, so I'm from the southern part, or most of my heritage from there. So like, it's sort of like a mix of like Greek and like Norman and like Arab and all kind Tunisian, Mali, and Ethiopia. It's all the it's more or less just like uh niggas in Italy. Um, so when you think about, and they never really had really they sort of had they were mostly kept to themselves unless and didn't really do much with the northern stuff. And then when the North sort of started, when the entire when Italy formed as a kingdom in the 1861, it really didn't cause much issue once everyone united under the one banner because they had a very similar faith and they sort of had a somewhat similar history, but they sort of were able to unite under a goal like that, and that really didn't separate them.
Yeah, that is true because like it worked in Italy because there actually was something to unify under. You know, they were Catholics, they were Europeans. I mean, I know that there are some ethnic differences, some cultural differences between the North and South, but I think there was enough there that they could actually build a coherent kingdom under. Problem is though that today people aren't thinking about that. They're just saying, well, let's just throw everything together and if it doesn't work, we're just going to call people racists. I mean, and that's just not going to be that's not going to work. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you can go ahead.
So pretty much the point is that like there needs to be people need to find something that like actually can unify people around, but at the same time we have to understand that there's going to be different interest groups and stuff like that, and there's going to need to be something that accounts for that. I mean, I don't know the solutions yet. I think it's more just my observations right now. But yeah, it's a difficult question to answer.
I mean, I sort of not like multicultural, like sort of like multi-religious sort of place. That's sort of odd is like Syria because most of like the minority religion, like the Druze and I'm not sure what's majority there, Sunni or Shia, but whatever one's the minority. I know that there are more Alawites within the government, which are Shia in origin, and then you have and then you have like virtually all the Christians in the country, more or less on Assad's side, and then you have and then you have Israel supporting the big nose tribes supporting the FSA and ISIS. I mean, they're also like Wahhabi and whatnot. Well, I think ISIS is Syria's or FSA is basically just like ISIS light,
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's sort of an odd place where it sort of worked out. Israel it is just a fucking mess. Jordan is injured. Jordan just I don't even know who cares. Who knows who cares? And Turkey, the Ottoman Empire genocided all the groups they didn't like. I mean, what else? What other places really like?
Well, yeah, I mean, but you have to understand. Yeah, pretty much all these ones that worked, they all had some kind of system to they had some kind of system to hold it together,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the West, we're not right now. We're just I mean, we're just kind of just throwing everyone in and just letting everything happen, and that will result in disaster, I think.
Yeah, but I feel like in Syria you can say like the reason they're more united is less because of their religion and more because of like cultural background, and that sort of unites them compared to Italy, where you could sort of say it's either like more religion and stuff like that, because you can sort of like have like the Roman, well, you could sort of cultural too, but like the whole Roman sort of thing. You have like the religious part too, but like that's also what. So that's why it also took Germany forever to unify compared to all the other states. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, do you have anything you want to say about that, Louis?
Um, no,
No.
no.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on to a different topic. Nazbal, you said something about the homosexual. How do I? What word should I use? Overtone or undertone?
That's a good question because they sort of like to imply it, but they like to but it's everywhere. It's good.
Hmm.
It's good.
So it's not. It's like Steven Universe, isn't it?
Over overtone in adolescent shows, undertone overall. Let's put it like that because in the kids shows they like to imply it, just like they like to just crazily push it.
Mhm.
They because like a lot. The only show I didn't really see that pushed it was like fucking regular show. Adventure Time did it. Gumball didn't do it. Gumball is amazing. One Gumball is sort of crazy how like they're woke. There's this one kid, or like there's one clip where one of the characters goes, "I'm not gonna fall for the mainstream media," and then some person's good response like, "Then you're not gonna have a life and marry an anime pillow." Like that's literally in the show.
Um, and
Oh.
they watched an anime after saying that line, right? Well, it is as if it's Adult Swim for children. I mean,
Exactly.
they made fun of both SJWs and Trump.
And Fritz Imperial,
How?
the anime.
Oh, that makes no sense. I haven't watched that segment of that episode yet about the mainstream media, and then they watched anime, and I
No,
still don't understand with the
he didn't.
debacle with Fritz.
No, it wasn't anime. The character said to one of the other ones, "You're gonna have because if you just keep if you keep acting like that, you're gonna have no life and be in it and just watch anime."
Okay. Now, okay. Now, as I was saying, how do we, if we were to not wish for children's show to have homosexual overtones or undertones, how do we counter argue that? Because they would end up justifying by saying that boys and girls like each other are in heterosexual relationships, and heterosexual relationships are shown in children's show. And if we use that logic about children not understanding homosexuality, yet they can still understand heterosexuality, wait, then the far left can by justify that of putting homosexual relationships into a children's show because children should understand that it's just normal as heterosexual relationships. But we know that homosexual relationships are abnormal statistically.
So I think what has to sort of be done is to sort of say like, from a moral standpoint, it's just not correct. I'm gonna keep referring to Classical Theist video, but he does a really good job of sort of explaining sexual immorality in that like it's a half-hour video. So I mean, that's where you sort of have to take. Some, I haven't watched. I watched like a month ago, so I don't have everything fresh in my mind. But like, he sort of goes through all of like. You also sort of explain the concept of platonic love, because that kind of form of love will probably be more effective instead of having love be more of a pleasure, and you have to sort of make it like you sort of have to get somewhere with the relationship. It's not supposed to be like, oh, go with one person, stay with them for like the sake of it. You break up when it doesn't feel like it's working, and you go on to someone else. You have to make it like you have to if you want to have a relationship, you have to make it last as long as humanly possible for people that aren't married. But then when you get married with this person, you have to make it like you're not moving on. You're not going to someone else after that. You're stuck with that person. It's like a final decision. That's one way to handle it, or one way to start handling it. The other thing with homosexuals is that they owe that it because you owe it with like a because with a heterosexual family you're supposed it's sort of like you stay with them for a long time, sort of like get to live with them, then you raise like a child and sort of essentially your life from raising the child, having like a job and like take care of the house, take care of the child, and then make the child grow up and getting old and die. So what you have to say with sexuality is that it can't really base itself off this because it's much more of a pleasure-based thing than it is like an actual like sort of like it's more just pleasure-based and almost like necessity and morally correct because it's because homosexuality is just you sort of just it's always promoted as like just rabid sex with someone else.
Well, the thing is that because the reason for relationships is reproduction,
Yes.
and yeah,
Like-
I mean, and obviously I mean, I would say that's my argument against it is that
putting someone's little Slim Jim in someone's sinkhole isn't going to really produce anything.
yeah, no, but
PG.
no, I mean that's because I think the real problem is in society that we kind of view sex as I think that kind of sex became a pleasure only thing, or at least like that was the primary purpose, like the primary focus of it, which is incorrect because I mean, just biologically, it's meant for reproduction. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and,
everyone. Well, here's two things. First of all, for humans, there weren't besides humans, the only other animal that can get pleasure from sex are dolphins, and with the sexual revolution, and they sort of like promoted like, oh, sex is like this fun little activity you do instead of like making it like a very special event because you can't don't celebrate virginity, just celebrate sex like a special event that happens not very often in life, and it only should happen not as minimal, but like a little enough, but only for reproduction instead of just like this whole pleasure thing. But like you had Sigmund Shlomo Freud put in his strong note that it was much more like a pleasure based thing.
yeah, I'd say the problem is kind of the materializing of it. So,
Yeah.
as in materialization, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Well, there's Can you go on, Nozbol?
Yeah, well, just call me Mediterranean Struggle. I like that. I like that title. I like that title a little more. But but I like but like the whole concept of like it's just like very unique for humans to get pleasure from sex. It's not very pleasurable for most other animals as their sex is just incredibly weird, especially for ducks and cats. If you want to look up how that works, it's very terrifying. Don't watch it, just read about it. But like you see, when you materialize it, you sort of make it like you sort of like belittling it to make it like, oh, do it as much as you can. It's not gonna matter. Then you have all these people just like going around fucking parties, getting drunk, and just fucking each other like jackrabbits, and it's just you're not getting anywhere unless you like want to raise a child and have a normal life. Then you can have sex. I mean, I'm not even getting into the sex before marriage part, and that's like an important thing.
And yeah,
No.
were you finished?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. What I was gonna say was I think that is kind of one of the roots of a lot of depression, especially among young men, because
look at Elliot Rogers.
Exactly.
Because he saw relationships as just sex going back and forth like a pinball machine instead of making it like stick to one person, stay with them as long as possible. Because I see it like that, and not a lot of other people see it like that, and I try to explain that to them. Because like I was rejected and sort of like kept looking for a girlfriend, but I kept telling people it's not like I'm doing it because I just want like a girlfriend, move on to someone else, like have it for a little bit, move on. So I'm trying to find someone I can stick with as long as I can, because I don't want because I mean when you get rejected, it's pretty shit feeling. I mean I sort of spiraled into a depression mainly because I got rejected, but then after that I almost got falsely accused of rape for making a couple jokes afterwards, and after that you sort of feel like you're locked off from that person. You can't like recover from the grief as like normally as you would expect to, and sort of like recover and then sort of like see them as like someone like maybe like a friend or something like that instead of like no, there's like a complete like electric fence for you.
Well, yeah, the problem is like that people today they're kind of their pursuit of relationships is driven entirely by lust for sex, then that's the problem, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they
Always go
just
down the shit. Always go down the shitter, and they're not like they don't last very long. Cause they're just like,
yeah,
well,
they don't last very long, and
they
that's the
last like
problem.
they last a couple. Yeah,
Nazbol, how
Yeah.
old are you?
15.
15. I think my situation is far worse with that, given that I'm only 22.
Hmm.
And I got rejected about 10 times in high school due to how socially awkward I am.
Yeah,
It
same.
happens.
Uh,
Yeah. With me,
and
it was almost a year since all that happened. Like, on Tuesday, on when it was gonna be Tuesday, that would be an exact year since the day I got rejected. I I remember I used to remember this whole week. I think I was gonna like talk to her about it that following Monday. I was gonna be like, it's gonna be all good. It'll work out. I get rejected because during the entire thing, I'm sort of like building up, thinking like it's not gonna work out. But then like once you sort of get to like she finds out, you're like maybe it might work out, and that's how I felt. And then you just get like stomped right into the fucking ground. Week later, boom, get like I make a thought joke and say I wish I had a girlfriend. Boom, I'm a rapist all of a sudden. Like I didn't know I didn't know I followed up Nanjing. I mean, I was pretty shocked when I found it out. I didn't just because I'm Asian, I didn't know I could follow up Nanjing like that. It's pretty fucking crazy, but I think I followed it up pretty well. I mean, a thought choke. I mean, that's a couple bayonets and bamboo for you right there.
Yeah. But what I will say though is that yeah, like I think that a large portion of the dissatisfaction in modern society is caused by this because because people can't just conceptualize an importance of a relationship, and that like what something you're actually building with it. It's they see it as as no, it's, just a way of getting sex, and that's the real problem.
Yeah, they see it as just like a sex, and then you just use them, move on, and you say this, and you see when this happens, you see this is where the feminists come out from, and then when you see these feminists speak, you're like, they're not, their head sort of focused in this somewhat right direction, but their solution to the problem is not going to solve a goddamn thing. It's just going to make things 10 times worse.
Well, okay, I mean the feminists, like they're I think that they have probably terrible solutions to everything.
Yeah, but like you sort of see because you sort of see their speeches, and after
Oh, yeah.
sort of like because like after I sort of joined because after that depression I sort of joined I couple months sort of recovered from it, joined you guys like the traditionalist group, but and then like I started to like, see how you guys viewed it, and I was sort of saying like this is sort of compatible with how I see it, and then after sort of like listening to like more of those feminist speeches, you sort of put together that they sort of have like they almost have it like subconsciously this, but like they're so, but they're like they're so like left wing that like they just sort of have such a materialist view on it that like it doesn't click to them.
Well, yeah, I mean you have to understand that they fundamentally reject just human things that are just human nature. So they'll say that pretty much anything a man does to court a woman is like harassment or stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not even
on that path.
I'm not even sure how to get a girl now, given that I'm a sophomore at the university, and I thought, and I can't remember if I was actually changing methods about getting a girl during high school, and I first entered high school when I was only 16 in late fall.
Yeah, what high school do you like? Do you go to high school in the United States or somewhere else? Because our high school system works a little different.
I'm from the United States.
Where I live, it's sort of like middle school 6 to 8, and that's from like 11 to 13. High school is from 14 to like 17. 12 to 9 to
No,
12.
when I said I was 16 and freshman, that the reason of that age discrepancy is due to the fact I repeated kindergarten for 3 years, due
Oh,
as I was immature at the time, and I was diagnosed with autism, but I didn't realize that until when entered fourth grade. But my parents and my social workers knew about it. I simply needed to wait until I was old enough to understand what was that. And another thing they could blame about my rejection, maybe it could be because I was fat, but it's very unlikely to be since I wasn't commented upon by my weight, but it's subconsciously because of that. Most of the
Well,
time, it's because of how I sounded to them, as if I were a monster.
okay.
Even though I was popular in high school, when it comes to talking to girls, I was awkward and I was constantly rejected.
Well, okay. I gotta head out soon, but one thing I will say though is, just think about the long. Just what people need to do is they need to focus on the long term. They need to focus on the idea that you want to create a family. You want to have like a partner that will help you do that, and that you feel will be someone that can help help you raise kids and stuff like that. Look at the long term, because this is the problem that we're having today. People don't do that, and they're it doesn't create an environment that you can actually create a family. And the problem with that is that without that, it doesn't create a strong civilization. It doesn't create a population that can perpetuate itself.
Yeah. And it's highly unlikely to have been because of my political views, because I was only slightly left before I entered my 11th grade year.
Okay. Well.
So it can't be because of politics. Though, though I did have a slight right-wing view when I said that I actually opposed abortion, except in very extreme cases.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I probably got to head out, guys. But
All right.
thanks for having me on.
Well, good night. So, how was the stream to you, though, Endeavor?
Oh, it was good. We talked about several good topics. Yeah, interesting conversations.
You should probably watch those two Lockskin videos and that video from Ben the Looney I also linked to you.
All right, I'll check them out.
Especially in regards with that Angry Birds movie, because that's a huge can of worms from both sides.
Wait, we
Oh,
talking about the Angry Birds movie. What were you?
That
What was that about? So it's probably something I missed.
I didn't watch that movie, but a user named Lockskin, which normally comments about video games, review watched the Angry Birds movie, and he felt as if there's propaganda from both sides.
all right. Well, I'll have to check that out. But anyway, thanks for having me on, Louis. Good conversation. Interesting stream.
Thank
And
you too.
yeah, I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting about the whole. Yeah, the Angry Birds movie sort of. I haven't watched it, but it's just probably just for that movie. Just people are probably just looking too deep into it in some cases, but I don't know what themes it had, so I can't say it was like one thing or the other.
Yeah, I'm going to link that video to you. Here it is on the right chat. There's also a part 2 to the video, though, so watch that too.
Is anyone else going to come on?
What?
Is anyone else going to come on?
Well, I tried to invite other people, but they don't seem to be interested.
I try to finish this stream up in the next half hour because I'm gonna go to sleep. Cause I went to sleep really late the night before. I woke up very late this morning, so I want to get a good night's sleep tonight. So let's get back on topic with the what we're talking about. So homosexuality and or being pushed within adolescent shows. So now that we've sort of talked about what we can concepts to bring up to them, or to bring up to people about why it's wrong to sort of put it in children's shows.
Well,
Wait,
what?
well, now that we sort of established like the concept of that, we were just talking about how what we saw is sort of like defend or like reasons we should sort of be against it being pushed on like children. What else should we move? What should we move on to within this subject?
Well, here's the thing though. Even if we were to oppose that, it's actually rather difficult to argue against pushing a homosexual agenda because we can't use moral terms against the left since many of them are rather atheistic. So that's out of the window of pushing. No, wait, that's not right. About saying that it's morally wrong because they don't argue in terms of morals. So, and we can't use biological terms since they deny most of biology.
Then you just gotta explain to them why those establishing factors are wrong, and then when you establish their factors of their of having no morality and their denial of gender biology incorrect, you sort of have to sort of drill in all these other factors about how it like causes like this whole like degeneracy and like STDs going fucking crazy, and like sort of just like drill it in from there. Because I don't want to sound like an asshole, but it's just the way they've pushed it and made it like so vehement and like incredibly degenerate. Like, I mean, homosexuality already starts off pretty degenerate to begin with, but like, you just like, the left sort of like took it and just sort of ran with it at like the speed of a fucking like one of those like bullet trains, and just sort of wanted to see how far they can go with this shit.
What are you doing with that noise?
Oh, it's just some little baton thing I have around. I usually just like to twirl around and whatnot.
Okay. So you're 15.
Yeah.
I wonder why you sound more intelligent than my 15-year-old brother. And he already has a slight problem with identity politics.
I think it's more.
What?
I think it's more how I was raised, more right wing, and I think what more or less sort of started to more move towards the what possibly was it because I was talking about how I started to get more like watch more political videos in the other stream, like watching all the skeptics, and once they fell to like the depression after like being rejected and like the false accusations of rape and whatnot, I sort of started to move on, and then sort of found you guys started to like actively sort of like listening to you guys sort of ask questions about certain things so that I'd be informed about how you guys viewed the world and what made it so important and a necessity.
Yeah. Now back to the topic about homosexuality in the media. How do you view the homosexual parents from the Loud House?
I haven't watched
Because
that, so
like you haven't watched that?
no, I haven't.
Oh, okay, because I'm pretty sure that's not degenerate. Just a gay couple raising a black child.
I've seen that before, but they like to sort of like start off at like making it seem very naive, and then once you start to delve in, they go full on degenerate. So like they sort of like get you like with a little hook because I don't know what that show's like, but I'm gonna assume it has a much more wide demographic, and they're gonna sort of have like it seem much more like innocent, and then you get into it and it's like, and then like they sort of push you in with the more degenerate stuff, and then like you sort of like the more they try to push you into the BLT community's Kool-Aid, they sort of like they sort of like push all this other like the the transgenderism, and like the what's it like the other bullshit, like I don't know, like the gender fluid stupid shit, like that's
Gender
pretty,
fluidity.
yeah, all the non-binary, like what the fuck is that, honestly? The pansexual, Is that like what is that like? What's that like Pan Arabism? But like for for gay folk, like I mean like the fuck's that for? Like that makes no sense. And then they're gonna and and soon enough they're gonna start pushing pedophilia by the end of it. I mean, with pedophilia they like to like they sort of like push it for long enough to like push it a little bit, and then people are gonna sort of be like, it sort of breaks them out of the trance and they push back on the pedophilia, and like they'll sort of go with all the other stuff. They can see much more innocent again. Then they'll start to peek out the pedophilia and they'll get pushed back. But each time they have to push it out again. They push out. They either have to push out a little stronger, or they have to, or the push won't be as hard the time before. And you see, with the left, it's honestly just like, well, the left already had or always had pedophilia as a thing. Just look up Nambla. But like, if you sort of like look at like what like child like the experiences of these people, just look up what's her name, Rhea Pratt. Also, if you look it up, go incognito mode because these drawings are like because she was part of like some like child sex abuse, like sort of like those like sex rings, sort of crazy shit, and she was like so traumatized from like what they did to her and other people that she developed schizophrenia, and she sort of like did like the therapy art to like get out like her frustrations about it. You see these like paintings, you'll shit. They are terrifying. You like Sargon did a video on it. It's like one of his only good videos, and at the end he'll show and he's like it's about Pizzagate and talks about like he's like because a lot of people when like people were sort of like flat out denying it, he was like, well, sexual abuse scandals and stuff like this for children exist. Here's this girl's things, and it's pretty fucking crazy. I'm just gonna put it like that. So I mean, if you want to look them up right now, just look up Rhea Pratt and just shit. And like, if you want to like shit your pants and not sleep tonight, you can go ahead and do that. But I mean, to the other viewers out there, I warn you, you may or may not have a good night's sleep tonight. But yeah, it's like it's like you see they'll get to like a crazy extreme by the end because I feel like I feel like the ultimate goal of the homosexual thing is to push pedophilia because the best way that homosexuality spreads is through like pedophilia because like look at like what happened with Milo Yiannopoulos and like George Takei. They were like sexually abused by an older dude and they were dudes as a child, and because it imprints on them sexual abuse at a much younger age, it's how they'll put it into their lifestyle. So when children sort of have like are sexually abused in a homosexual way, they'll turn up being homosexual in much more cases. I'm not saying it happens to everyone, but it's much more likely. I don't know the numbers on this stuff because I don't want to look into this shit.
Can please link to that video you mentioned?
Of Sargon?
No, you said that name that starts with an R.
Just look up Rhea Pratt on Google.
Rian Pratt. How do I spell that?
RIAPRATT.
RIAPRATT. Riyad Pratt.
Rhea Pratt. Oh. Did you find them?
No, I think I misspelt it.
I'll send it to you.
Ah. Wait a minute. I had already watched that video by Sargon, but I thought Sargon actually had. No, wait. I thought Sargon actually refused to cover Pizzagate because he believes it's just mostly conjecture.
Yeah, he believes that. Like in his video, he says, "Pizzagate." I don't believe Pizzagate it's being projected, but sexual abuse scandals do exist. That's like sort of his little thesis of that's sort of his message of the video, and he'll show those pictures of Rhea Pratt if you've seen them.
Yes.
Yeah,
Um,
they're pretty terrifying.
in fact, I had already watched that video about a year ago, and I did leave a comment about my reactions towards those pictures, and I thought only one of them will end up giving me mental anguish. That was until there was another picture that is even worse than the previous. Yes, but at this point, I'm somewhat desensitized.
But one of the ones that the ones that spooked me out, like like the ones in the like what the picture, like you know how like they sort of have like the picture like the figures, but like they're much more like sort of partial. Like you see like those are the ones that freak me out, and like the ones that like you look at those photos, but they're like this fucking like the good thing they're just like in very simple shapes because if those are in detail, you wouldn't be sleeping.
Yeah,
They're
and
fucking
those pictures are already graphic,
oh yeah, they're
even in simplified forms.
yeah they're
Uh,
yeah
uh,
they
okay. So, okay. Also, you once mentioned earlier that about that you mentioned about a video covering platonic love, right?
yeah I
When
mentioned that
Endeavour was here.
yeah.
Could you link that video to me?
No, I didn't. I just classical theist video, but he doesn't mention really platonic love in that. I just remember that specifically because Richard Struggle mentioned it in one of his videos that if that like that's more of a valid view of love. I think classical theist will will mention it in his. It says here's the video: natural laws, sexual ethics, and why FAP is degeneracy. That's the name of the video. I'm gonna send it. I'm gonna send you a link. It's I'll put it in the chat too, so that the folks there can watch it after the stream.
There are only three viewers.
They'll have a nice little they'll have a nice little video to watch before they go to sleep after this live stream in like 15 minutes.
Okay then. Now then, now that we know the reasons about why we shouldn't um, put homosexual subcontexts in children's show, how do we counter argue that though? Because we can't use um, tra- we can't argue on moral terms since they are atheists most of the time. We can't
Oh,
use biology; they deny biology. Then there is the um, STDs thing, which they wouldn't even care. Um, so we're left with confusion with children in their minds, but then they would justify that with heterosexual relationships. But the thing is, we need to be very careful on how we present the information because it has to be a gradual shift to understanding why um, why homosexuality is abnormal, not sudden. We otherwise will end up with what Mouthy Buddha has done.
what did Mouthy Buddha do? I don't know. What did he do? He doesn't.
Um, let's see. He basically took an overdose on the red pills by understanding the alt right and race realism very much to the point that he'll end up viewing minorities in mundane situations as statistics. And people, including myself, should have warned him not to overdose on that.
Yeah, like
It was bad. It should have been gradual.
yeah, you have to sort of say like it shouldn't be. You don't really have to say it's immoral. You have to start with just it shouldn't be promoted to kids because it's not like a mature enough concept for them to understand, and it's just going to leave them confused. And if you want them to learn if you want them to get your concept, they should do it when they're older and it'll stick to them much easier. So you shouldn't promote it when they're young and won't know what the fuck's going on. You should do it once they're able to get a grasp on it. and then once you sort of get them out in the open, you sort of have to force them to admit morality or biology. Or once you make them capitulate on one of those terms, you just sort of barrage them on one of the two. You just barrage them on both of them.
Okay. Yeah, but how do I describe this? But then we'll end up becoming called bigots towards the gays because we want to let children understand homosexuality and at a young age, given that they can justify that with heterosexual couples.
You gotta tell them one very specific thing: hate the sin, love the sinner, and you just gotta tell them we don't hate these people. We just sort of dislike. We just find the lifestyle immoral. You don't. These people might well be good intention to heart. They just have a degenerate lifestyle when it comes to something that's going to be very important to them in their adult lives. So we should sort of tell them it's not the best choice of means to them. It's less love based and more pleasure based.
Yep, and then they say stunning and brave.
Yeah, they're fucking nice. You could say some of them are well intentioned, but once you get the Kool-Aid of all the BLT shit, I'm not sure how good of a person you can how morally good you really are as a person. I'm gonna say, well, I disagree with them on that, but I'm not jerking them. I'm not really attacking them, their person. I'm attacking their lifestyle. You have to say it like that because you can't say these people. It's not like because you sort of have to detach the sort of concept with the person. And once you do that, you can't be called a bigot because you're not hating them. You're not hating the individual person. You're hating the sort of overarching little sexual activities that they partake in. But you have to admit one simple thing that it's not being gay that's the problem. It's acting or committing not committing, but on practicing homosexual acts like gay, sex or something crazy like that, or sucking your homie's pee-pee. It's just something like that. That's what's immoral. When that's the immoral stuff. It's not like the being attracted to them, as long as you don't act out on those urges. That's how the Bible will view, or that's a more Christian or Catholic view, Catholic and Orthodox. I'm pretty sure.
Even in private homes, because I would oppose that if that happens in the public, but not if they're doing it privately. Though obviously there's too much degeneracy in gay pride parades compared to the parades in Japan.
Oh yeah, who's that video? Black Christian Speaks. But you have to say something like this: even if they do it in private, it doesn't mean that they might be doing something immoral, but you shouldn't force them to not do. You just have to convince them because you can't really just beat the gay out of someone. That's just a horrible thing. That's a horrible thing to do.
Know that.
You have to sort of convince, or not sort of say this is degeneracy. It's not a productive lifestyle, and you're sort of just negating the whole concept of love. That's how I see it. You can't really just attack the people. But it's also you have to walk on eggshells with the left. If you don't, you're really taking a big shit. All right.
And besides, so have you watched Steven Universe?
No, because I saw it when I was 10 or whenever how old I was when I first saw the ad for that. I cringed really. I had a cringe moment.
I only watched about 2 episodes, but then I got bored afterwards. So I don't even understand the significance about homosexuality in that show. Would that be an example of
that? It's an interesting
progressivism.
Here's why it works, because one of the crystal gems, which are one of those female alien characters and whatnot, what's revealed is that in one of the season finales that one of the gems is actually two of the is actually two individuals, but like because they're so in love that they fuse together to become one individual because they're gem or some stupid shit like that. I don't know. It's something along the lines of that. It's really weird, you know. But like that show was just a liberal outlet, and I wouldn't watch it. I think I might have watched it when I was like 10, and it was like the end of like the Lego Ninjago, or like there was like that big break for the Lego Ninjago series. I saw like the little ad for that, and I was like cringe, and I was like, okay, I'm not watching that. That was like also 10. When I saw like it was like the little teaser trailer for it, and on like Cartoon Network on the 3 minute commercial breaks, and I was like, that show can only be so good.
Get and yet they're calling that show as a form of progressivism or a form of progress within children's show, despite the fact how far do we go with something that's becoming edgy to the point that we're not being pussies anymore, like children in Japan and the degeneracy. Because that's one thing to use something in a comedic or violent context, but another that leads to degeneracy.
Then again, one more thing. Well, with Japan, I think you said homosexuality was less of a taboo in their society. Well, being a degenerate in their society wasn't irregular. Like I'm pretty sure sodomy, polygamy, I don't even
Polygamy.
polygamy. That's it. Those were very common in feudal Japan, and when like the Jesuit Portuguese missionaries showed up and were like sort of like saying like that Jesus and whatnot, the Japanese were pretty quick to kill a lot of them. It's pretty bad, pretty horrible. I mean, I'm not sure. Well, that's like in feudal Japan. I'm not sure if it like calmed down with the Meiji Restoration or not. I have to look into that, but it makes a very interesting sort of. It's sort of interesting. Well, also with like the whole left, they don't really like push it like they don't push it and take it. They sort of like because it's less of a taboo in their society. They don't have to like take it and run with it for like until if all of the people debating them just get tired and have to like concede to them. It's less of a taboo there, and they don't have to make it as much of a public display. And that's probably why that's why their pride, praise, and whatnot are less degenerative. I mean, then again, Japan's probably the most degenerative of the East Asian countries, like Korea, Mongolia, China, and the other folk. That's why they lost their Korean fishermen, probably, but yeah, feudal Japan was like they were just evil people. They were like they were just total fucks. That might just be because I'm also part Korean. I'm just gonna have a Godzilla's pretty good though. I do like that. I'm a big fan of that. And Metal Gear Solid. They're not anime though. That shit's pretty bad. Don't watch it unless it was that Godzilla anime. That was okay because it wasn't like whatever Fritz watches. I don't know what he watches, but I'm very afraid to find out.
I'm pretty sure. Wait, as in the very violent ones, because I'm pretty sure I watched something worse than that. Plenty, except anything that involves with gays.
I never really see that much gay anime, but you do see a lot of Yuri anime, which is like the lesbian anime. That seems to be common occurrence among the Japanese folk, which is a very odd thing.
Just you do realize that we should be clear that first of all, anime is not exactly big in Japan, and even by even hardcore anime fans acknowledge that
Oh, really?
it's still a niche.
That's so funny. Well, it's like it's virtually like a niche everywhere.
Well, yes, in general, except for children and a few a few fans of anime. So maybe a small percentage of the country. It's just the Western countries are bigger fans of anime than Japan.
Well, that's because they have much larger populations than Japan. I'd assume. I mean, the United States, I think, is 3 times the population of
Yes.
Japan.
Besides, they frown otaku upon us, so that's another thing. So it's not exactly that degenerate, given that they still maintain their traditions, but then again, their emphasis on hard work is so great that they can't even form families anymore.
Yeah, yeah, that's the problem with
And it's
with the East Asian countries in general. But
and we could
yeah,
hardly blame it on degeneracy since it's like putting the cart before the horse.
that's it. And not in special effects director for many of the early Godzilla films was a convert to Catholicism later in his life when he started like around those times he started making the films. I mean, like the Godzilla films sort of a lot of them always had a message to them, which you watch a good handful and you'll see a message in almost a good handful of the movies. First one, Return of Godzilla, Shin Godzilla, 2014, the American one, the one that doesn't, the good American one. Some of the other ones that the All Monsters Attack or GMK, that one. What other one? I'd have to watch them, but watch them again because I watched most of them already. But
I have to be honest, I don't watch Godzilla at all.
at least I'm not fritzing them.
I still
but
don't. What?
no, because I don't. Because I'm not like I don't watch it on constant. I just sort of will watch it every now and again.
Yeah, I wonder if I'm similar to Fritz since that one. I love anime, but then again, I have plenty of other hobbies,
Yeah,
especially writing music in
yeah,
the classical, various classical styles.
yeah. Because with Godzilla, it's as sort of like a franchise. It's less consumerist than you would like than I like you'd expect. So there isn't like that much of that medium compared to like something like Star Wars or like something or like a big name like that, where you sort of have like all these toys, all these video games, and all that. All the Godzilla games are pretty shit, and you get like you'll get there are a lot of kids figures, but there are some statues you can get and whatnot, but there's very little amount of it, and the ones you can get are or most of them are very expensive. Like most of them will go for at least $50. So there's and then you just have the movies that come out like every couple of years. So it's much less consumerist than like Star Wars that will like push out toys into a medium like on a constant and will always be making like big bucks. Cause you have to think about like this for after like because Godzilla like it would always go through in and out of recessions for periods of time and wasn't very profitable. And then when they'd bring it back, they'd start to make money. Then they'd calm down, and then they would do it again because they were less consumers with it, like in America, and just sort of like people that actually wanted to make the movies or make movies and like not want to make it like fucking for the sake of making money.
Fair point. The fact that we, the fact that you constantly reference Fritz, despite the fact I still don't understand the overall context, especially given that there were no signs of that issue in his more recent videos,
I mean,
still confuses me.
his thumbnail for the Prussian history one is an anime girl with a Prussian flag.
That's what?
His video on Prussian history with the anime girl is the thumbnail, holding the Prussian flag.
That was just one thumbnail.
Yeah, but he's a big fan of anime, from what I'm aware of. I'm not gonna.
He did say that he actually wait, that has nothing to do with Hetalia, given that he made it clear that he actually hates Hetalia.
I mean, I think he just used it and just sort of photoshopped it to make it work out. But I think anime is much more consumerist in the niches it operates in. You should probably stop talking about him before he finds out, and then.
Hey, Scott! Should we stop talking about it now and then talk in private within this stream? I could just
Nah.
stop the broadcast.
I gotta go to bed, so let's just end the stream here. It's like two folks watching. Good night. Have a wonderful sleep. Go watch classical theist video on natural sexual ethics and why FAP is degeneracy. And yeah, I'll be on another one of these streams. It's the only ones I'm on. Have a wonderful Sunday and good night.
Okay, one last thing. Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you.